Are there any areas in Pokémon you haven't been to? I'm not talking about the ones in games you haven't played, but the optional areas and ones you have played. Maybe you meant to do it later and forgot about it. You intended to return after going to the Pokémon Center and it just slipped your mind. Maybe you never even knew it existed. It's so off to the side it never even crossed your mind to explore that way. These are the areas less traveled. Areas that are off the beaten path and that the average player probably overlooks. They're not completely unknown, mind you, but you might have to jog someone's memory to have a conversation about them. They're forgettable, they're hard to get to, or they're just not worth stopping by. That is the topic of today's video, and we'll be exploring a few with the expectation of visiting some more in the future. I've covered places like this in the past, such as the abandoned ship, but for today I'll be sticking to places I haven't covered before. For now, sit back, relax, and let's go to the areas less traveled. Fuego Ironworks is an area that's mystified me for a long time. It's the only place in this video that I'm 100% confident in calling less traveled, because even the NPCs within are shocked that anyone would make the trip out. No story plays out here, and nothing is necessary. Even to get the national dex, there are alternatives to catching the exclusive wild Pokemon here. It epitomizes the type of area that used to feel underexplored in a pair of games, that then gets revisited and recontextualized in the definitive third version that Pokemon games had through the first 4 generations. But it wasn't revisited. I was shocked that nothing significant had really changed from Diamond and Pearl to Platinum. There are changes, yes, but I wouldn't really classify any of them as making Fuego Ironworks a must-visit location. It's like putting lipstick on a Grumpig. Sure, it looks prettier, but it's still a Grumpig at the end of the day. In Platinum, one can get shards from Mr. Fuego in exchange for star pieces, but it's so much of a pain to get them, why bother? In the time it takes the star pieces to respawn in Iron Island, you could dig up dozens of shards underground. Granted, this is a good way to guarantee one of each, but I've always had a surplus because of how much time I've spent digging for things like evolution stones. Which reminds me, Fuego Ironworks is one of the places where some of the finite fire stones in Sinnoh can be found. One in this corner, and one from Mr. Fuego and Diamond and Pearl and their remakes only. But again, you can just dig them up underground. Oh, and even if you had 20, there'd be nothing to use them on because, as I'm sure you've heard, Sinnoh has no fire types, much less ones that utilize the Firestone to evolve. That's probably why they reduced the amount you get here in Platinum. In Diamond and Pearl, there was actually nothing to use a Firestone on prior to beating the Elite Four. Platinum added an Eevee. One of the most baffling things that Diamond and Pearl did was give 24 Pokemon new evolutions, and then put those Pokemon that they evolved from in the post-game, if at all. Whether or not the developers realized this was something they wanted to go back on or not, they did change things up for Platinum. The aggressively Sinnoh lineup of Shinx, Luxio, Pachirisu, Shellos, Gastrodon, and Floatzel is reduced, and supplemented with Magnemite and Magmar, which are about 1 billion times more fitting for a steel mill. Many areas received similar changes to their encounter table in Platinum, many of them as drastic as the Ironworks, but I will say that none feel as jarring before the change. Other routes like 221 I don't bat an eye at, any table is fitting. The Ironworks in Diamond and Pearl feel like an afterthought. Nothing is exclusive, and in fact it's just a higher level version of its access route. The Ironworks are weird to even get to. It becomes available after you get Surf, at which point you can take the river on Route 205 north. It's a pain to travel to with the slow surf speed of Diamond and Pearl, but what isn't? It was increased in Platinum, so clearly it was identified as an issue. The Ironworks are a rare example of industry being acknowledged in the Pokemon games. The shops are stocked, nobody starves, and we just don't think about it. Fuego Ironworks is where iron is refined and machine parts are produced for the entire Sinnoh region. It's filled with spin tiles that can make the works confusing to traverse, but that's really only if you overthink it. Pretty straightforward if you can put aside memories of the rocket bases. Now that I mention it, Fuego Ironworks stands out as one of the few places with spin tiles that isn't associated with the evil teams. Funnily, Mr. Fuego has a meta comment about how he added the tiles to this place, and no one liked it. I actually kinda like puzzles like this. I'm awful at the ice ones though. I can't put my finger on it, but this just isn't a place to hang out. I don't know how else to explain my unease than this. Fuego Ironworks feels like the type of area you'd see in grainy footage from a Gen 3 ROM hack back in the day. It's plausible enough that it makes you wonder if it's real. That's the sort of vibe I get from Fuego Ironworks. But this is a real place, and it's weird. I like it. This next one is a little bit, shall we say, situational. This entry is half of Shoal Cave. Which half specifically? Whichever one your copy of Ruby, Sapphire, or Emerald didn't get stuck on when the battery ran dry and the in-game clock stopped. For those who don't know, Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald rely on a battery within the cartridge to keep track of in-game time, among other things. When it runs out, all sorts of things happen, such as berries not growing, but your save file is fine. This is in contrast to the Generation 1 and 2 games, in which the save file is connected to the battery, and your save file is lost when the battery runs dry. Again, in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, the only thing that stops is time. And if you didn't know, Shoal Cave is an area that's unique in that its layout changes depending on the time. For half of the day, it's full of water, and shoal shells can be collected. The other half, it's drained, and you can collect shoal salt. 4 of each, and this old man will make you a shell bell, a useful held item that restores HP equal to part of the damage your Pokemon deals. Meaning, if you don't know how to replace a Hoenn game's battery, you could be locked out of this useful held item. More than that though, it's possible your cartridge has an unobtainable Pokemon. The Ice Room, accessible via the Low Tide map, is the only source of Snorunt in the main series Gen 3 games. So if your file's in-game clock froze at high tide, you need to trade over a Snorunt, or replace the battery. I mean, it's super easy, I've done it myself and I'm an idiot. But isn't that an interesting thought? A potentially unobtainable Pokemon, and it's not an event mythical or something like that. It's hard-coded in, it's not a version exclusive, and there's no tricks to find it. It's a regular Pokemon who can't be found if, pun intended, your game froze at the wrong time. I'm not sure there's another Pokemon with this distinction, because unlike something such as, say, Island Scan Pokemon, where theoretically they're unobtainable if your 3DS camera breaks, battery failure is an inevitability for all Gen 3 Hoenn games. I would be shocked if there's still a cartridge out there that hasn't suffered a dry battery in the past 2 decades. This means that likely half of all original Hoenn cartridges can't obtain Snorunt without a soldering iron. I was one of them. I myself had no idea Snorunt was in Shoal Cave, because my childhood file froze at high tide. And this was only like 5 years after the games first came out. I couldn't figure out how to make the tide go down for years because I was just some kid. I remember seeing videos on YouTube in the late 2000s where people showed off how to catch Snorunt, and I thought they were hoaxes like Mew3. I assumed I was doing something wrong, and kind of just let Snorunt go because I didn't like it that much. Nor was I a Pokédex completionist until about half a decade later when Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire were announced. I just didn't care about Snorunt. I liked Spheal a lot more, and it can be found in Shoal Cave during high and low tide. But if my preferences were reversed, I would have been out of luck. This is actually the first time I've been down here doing the ice puzzle and searching for Snorunt somehow. Ignore how incompetent I am. Probably because of the changing nature of the cave, people are almost entirely absent from it. There's no trainers to fight, unlike other caves in Hoenn. The old man who makes the shell bell is a constant, but when the water level is low, this black belt offering a focus band can be found. He seems to have figured out the timing of the tide, because he's back here every day to do whatever it is he does. Shoal Cave has a very cool concept. Oddly enough, I kind of associate it with things like the PSS and the GTS, and that somewhere in the back of the developers' minds, they must have known it wasn't going to last forever. But unlike these online services, Shoal Cave is an explorable place. It's honestly kind of worse than places like New Moon or Southern Island that are accessed through decades-old events. At least those places are normally inaccessible. You always lose access to one half of Shoal Cave just due to time. And if you're unlucky, it gets stuck at high tide. I don't think Shoal Cave gets talked about nearly enough when discussions about obsolete features come up, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not a big deal. It's just an interesting talking point for a video. You've probably been to Route 123 in Hoenn. It's accessible via Route 118 and is the home of the Berry Master couple. Those of you who are into contests have probably made dozens of trips here for free berries. Their lawn is also one of the best spots to grow berries in the entire region. But this video is about the areas less traveled, so let's talk about the part of it that's less traveled. Part connected to Mount Pyre. It's intended that one hops down the ledges on your way back towards Slateport City after you deal with Team Aqua or Magma atop Mount Pyre. Except you just got the HM for Fly, and the situation is dire, so why wouldn't you just fast travel instead? Of course, that's not my philosophy these days, but my point remains. No one I've talked with about this route has known that it's connected to Mount Pyre. There's really no other reason to traverse this route this way, other than to not have to backtrack toward Fortree if you're playing without flying, which as far as challenge runs go, playing without fly is a little bit less weighty than something like a Nuzlocke. The playable maps are relatively tiny, just fly. But if your mind can't be changed, there are a few goodies to be had and interesting trainers to talk to. Cutting the first tree you see nets you a rare candy, which are rare. You can also battle this psychic, who appears to have discovered the secret to strength in the Pokemon world. Just decide not to lose. It's that easy, I guess. Or not. I don't think I know of an NPC who's more blunt than this guy. I feel sad. Dang, that makes me feel bad. This girl buys some more berries, gives you the Giga Drain TM in Gen 3 and a Big Root in Gen 6, if you have a Grass-type Pokemon in your party. I'd hate to come here without one, only to think I'm missing out on something, or to rerun this route in general. But if we look at an overhead map, we can see that you'll probably end up repeating this route several times if you aren't careful. This northeastern portion of the route is made into a one-way by the copious ledges. If we hop down a few more, we can meet Cool Trainer Clyde, who decides to test our worthiness to have badges like he's an Elite Four member or something. Clyde and his level 29 Swellow are a force to be reckoned with. Psychic Jackie warns us about the potential of our Pokemon suddenly developing psychic powers. I've never considered it, but is it possible for non-psychic Pokemon to develop psychic powers the same way humans in the game seem to be able to? I guess that might explain Pokemon such as Chansey and Gorobus being able to learn moves like Psychic. Perhaps all beings have the potential for psychic power, and move pools could serve as a means to show the individual potential of a species. They can't just give every Pokemon psychic abilities, that would skew balancing, but narratively this may be a possibility. Overall, this section of the route feels very bizarre. The primary draws of the route can be accessed readily through Route 118. It's a liminal space by definition, as the primary function of this part of the route is to use it as a shortcut. Unlike other routes, it's not a place to hang out, train, or catch a rare Pokemon. You just pass through. I know places described as liminal online are typically devoid of people, but I think the oddball trainers you meet here contribute to the vibe. It's really odd to see the types of trainers you'd speak to on Mount Pyre in sunny grassland, regardless of how close it is. Mount Moon is an iconic location, there's no question about it, but it's one of the returning locations in the Johto games that's extremely truncated. This is understandable given that Gold, Silver, and Crystal depict the entire Kanto region in their post-game. Some things just had to get scaled down, even more so for the locations you aren't required to go through to get all of the Kanto badges. Mount Moon is one such location with a reduced interior. It goes from a sprawling cavern that attracts geology and paleontology enthusiasts of all skill levels to a quick jaunt between Pewter and Cerulean. I'm not criticizing the fact that it isn't one-to-one with its original counterpart. I'm simply acknowledging that the vibe does shift as a result of the changes. Mount Moon feels deeply wrong. There's more to do outside on the connecting routes than there is to do within the cave. For this iconic cavern, this insurmountable mountain, to take 5 seconds to get through is a foreign feeling. I recall playing Fire Red and Leaf Green for the first time and being filled with the sense that I was undertaking a test of a new trainer's endurance. You're told countless times to prepare well for the journey through Mount Moon, and it really can be an arduous journey if you're underprepared. Then, in 2010, when I played Heart Gold and Soul Silver, I stocked up on repels and potions and all manner of items, anticipating that my second journey through Mount Moon, this time as a seasoned trainer, would be challenging. And then there was nothing but a rival battle. I thought to myself, I guess they can't put something interesting in every single place. But they did put something interesting here. This event is basically the only reason I selected Johto Mount Moon for this video. You see, in Legends Arceus, there's a quest involving the moonlit activities of Wild Clefairy in the Coronet Highlands. They put on a dance in front of the full moon and leave behind a moonstone. I recall many people being surprised to know that this was actually a reference to something you can witness in the Johto games, on Monday nights only. If you take this ladder up rather than continuing on the floor, you reach Mount Moon Square, an entirely new area. If you come at the right time, again, Monday nights, you can witness a 2D version of the spectacle you may have witnessed in Arceus. They hop along this pond which reflects the moon, a brilliant way to depict it in a top-down game, and leave upon noticing you. You can collect the moonstone they leave behind and do this every Monday night. It's really cool and quite easy to miss. There aren't any exclusive Pokemon or anything here, so the novelty of watching this event does wear off after a few times. There's also a shop here, which, to my knowledge, is one of the only ones in the series that has hours. They're open from 10 AM to 5:59 PM, and sell some refreshments typical of a tourist stop. Could you imagine if Pokemarts or the department store closed? It's weird to think about, considering their analogs in the real world do close. Well, maybe not convenience stores in Japan, but malls certainly do. I guess everything being 24-hour in Pokemon games is one of those things that you don't think about while playing, like what exactly all the NPCs eat. Of all the shops that would close though, it makes sense that this one at Mount Moon Square does. I'm guessing it's a tourist or hiking attraction, and typically you don't do these things after dark. The man behind the counter is old, so he probably has better things to do than sell lemonade at 2 a.m. That's about it for this place, but I'd like to point out something on the route leading up to it. This is perhaps the most devious trainer placement in the entire series. I was completely blindsided trying to avoid this other trainer, and my brain short-circuited while I processed the sheer cheese that went into putting this NPC here. Major props, honestly. I can't even be mad. Well played. Now, I just mentioned this place in my Safari Zone video, but the Altering Cave is too odd not to mention. There's almost no conceivable reason to visit here. You can't even make the excuse of wanting to pick up all the items for completion's sake, even potions or something, because there are none to be had. All you can find here in an unaltered save game are Zubat, which is where the almost no reason to visit here comes into play. You could use this place as a speed EV grinding spot, but there are more convenient places to use. One's not exclusive to the post-game. So why does this place exist if it has no use? Well, it appeared originally in Fire Red and Leaf Green, with data existing in the games to suggest that there were supposed to be events that changed the Pokemon encountered inside. You would have been able to change the Zubat into Mareep, Aipom, Pineco, Shuckle, Teddiursa, Houndour, Stantler, or Smeargle. Nothing was done with this area in the time it took between Fire Red and Leaf Green and Emerald, and when the latter was released, still nothing was done. Not even a single remote, limited, one-off distribution. To make it even weirder, every single Pokemon that would have been available as part of this scrap distribution ended up in Emerald's extension to the Safari Zone, except Smeargle, who was put at the Battle Frontier. So, in essence, the intended outcome of the Altering Cave was added into a game alongside it. It doesn't appear until after the champion is beaten, so it makes me wonder why they left it accessible in the first place. They weren't particularly shy with limited events and exclusive items prior to this, and really the only other significant unused yet accessible event that comes to mind is the Flute. I would really like to know if there exists any documentation regarding development decisions made about the Altering Cave. So if anybody knows anything, please let me know. I would say that the earlier you got into Pokemon games, the more likely it is that you passed over places like these. The original games were sometimes frustratingly open-ended, and the small sizes of the assets meant that more care could be taken towards things that aren't on the path to the credits sequence. Pokemon games do still have extra, unnecessary areas, but the quick developmental cycle means that they're more intentional. A trip off the beaten path is usually going to reward you with a rare Pokemon nowadays. As we've seen today, that hasn't always been the case. Which of these places have you been to? Which of these have you not been to? Was there anything you expected me to mention, but I didn't? Let me know down below. Please also do that if you like this video. And if you like this video, consider liking it and subscribing. I've got some more content coming up, so keep an eye out. If you'll excuse me though, I need to go hop some ledges.
What the what?